Women often feel lost as investors. So, where do we begin? And how should women get started? And how do women make themselves heard at work, whether it's in meetings, in the boardroom, and also, the most important, in their personal life? Hi, I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, host of Finance is Personal. Today's show is about female empowerment. I've been speaking to so many young women since COVID and lockdowns, and those questions seem to come up over and over again. The other two major questions I always get asked are, how do I make a decision? And how do I build confidence? So we work in male-dominated industries, and we want to make sure that our voice is heard. We also live longer than men, and we need to prepare for our life stages. To help us find answers to these questions and more, I'm joined by Rita Trichur, an award-winning journalist and great voice for female empowerment. Rita is also senior business writer and columnist in the Globe and Mail's Report on Business. Rita, welcome. I'm really excited to have you on the show today because, I've been speaking a lot, and I know you've been speaking a lot, especially during the pandemic. And a lot of it has had to do with female empowerment and helping women get to the next level because, quite frankly, women have been hit the hardest during the pandemic. So I'm going to begin right away with, how has the pandemic affected women's finances? But what are the hard lessons that we've learned from this crisis as well?
Okay, thank you for having me. So yes, women have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. We've seen that. The first wave in particular, which really hit service sector jobs, saw a lot of women disproportionately affected. They lost their jobs. There was a calculation at one point by Royal Bank of Canada that 30 years of women's workforce gains had been absolutely obliterated by the pandemic in a very short order. Now, some people have returned to work, some women have returned to work, but as this pandemic has dragged on, what are we like almost in month 15 now? We've seen some women, even at this stage, having to make some very difficult choices. So the ones that perhaps had a job to go back to or didn't leave the workforce at all, are finding that, with the return of online schools in some jurisdictions because of the reimposition of a government mandated lockdown and stay-at-home orders, that they are in a terrible position. They are, working moms in particular, are having to choose between taking on, once again, an additional burden at home and homeschooling the children and participating in childcare, or trying to work full time and do both. It's an impossible choice. So depending on the situation, women have had to decide, okay, am I going to try to do both? Am I going to try to juggle? Or does it just make more sense right now for me to take a step back professionally and let my partner, if we're talking about a heterosexual couple, we're talking about the husband, take the lead in terms of being the breadwinner. But I say one of the things that this pandemic has really shone a light on are, well, of course, the need for an emergency fund. I mean, that goes without saying for everyone. But also, in the case of women, what it really means for women's financial independence, their professional aspirations, and this notion of the primacy of their role as mothers and caregivers. And kind of the toll that's taken on women who are trying to get everything done during an exceedingly difficult time.
And you're 100% correct here, because women are needed for an economic recovery. Yet now they're at home trying to figure out, do I give up my job? Do I take care of my children because of the childcare situation? Most of them are single as well, so they actually don't even have a spouse to help them out with. And you're right. Emergency funds are non-existent, or if they were existent, they're no longer existent right now. And one of the things that you had said to me was, you felt that the financial industry failed female clients. And how do you think so?
So I wrote a piece about this for the Globe and Mail for International Women's Day, and I talked about the financial services industry has done a very poor job catering to the very specific needs of women. Now, of course, each woman's needs are different, and that's kind of the point. It's long relied on this one size fits all approach. So if it's good enough for men or most men, naturally it's good enough for women. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the, I think, a mistake that the industry has made in not trying to customize its offerings, products, services, advice for female clients. I mean, not every woman is a mother, but the life stage planning component isn't always considered when women have these discussions about what their goals ought to be. And, the advisor doesn't always think of it because perhaps there's an assumption, well, she's just going to get married and she's going to have children and her husband is going to naturally take care of those sorts of things. So there isn't kind of a viewing the woman as an individual who might have individual needs. The other thing that I wrote about in that piece is the feeling from women that the industry often talks down to them. So a lot of them feel like even when they ask for advice, it can be very condescending and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. They don't really feel like they want to pursue that. It can be a real turnoff. So, it's the lack of customization, the lack of acknowledgement that women's kind of the lifestyle and life stage planning requirements are different. And then just a lack of, recognition that, we shouldn't be talking down to them. And that in part is a function of the fact that there is a gender diversity problem. Women are underrepresented in the financial services industry.
And that's something I was just about to say, right? It's very difficult to find a lot of women who are investment advisors or financial planners because it's such a male-dominated industry. And it's the same thing with the car industry as well. I've purchased my car and I know what I've been through, and I'm sure you've purchased a car and you've been through the exact same experience as well. And you're right. I think a lot of times, because these are all male-dominated industries, there is a disconnect with, trying to relay a specific message or trying to, be on the same page and level the playing field. And I think that's a problem that we've had, for a very long time.
I think it's also a little bit of excuse making on the part of the industries as to why they haven't addressed this sooner. I mean, one of the things that they are required to do is know your client,
yes.
the KYC rules. So, I mean, why don't they know their clients? I mean, this is a legitimate question. It goes, the spirit of KYC in many cases has to do with knowing the source of funds and making sure that people aren't engaging in money laundering or bad behavior. But the spirit of this really should be to act in the best interest of your client as well, know who they are and what their needs are, and to provide advice that's appropriate.
Absolutely. Now, what advice would you give to women about money management and life, especially when they first graduate from school? I read this post it was posted on the Women's Collection website, and it said about 35% of all millennial women have no savings at all. And many more admit that they struggle with establishing a savings account beyond the retirement plan. And I mean, this is something that we need to instill in the younger generation that, as soon as you find a job, you start saving money, whether you have it or not.
Absolutely. So I was just going to say automatic savings. You need to have something in place where automatically a portion of what you earn automatically goes to savings. Now, of course, this doesn't mean you go into debt to fund your lifestyle or to pay for like required needs, but there has to be something that's left over, and whatever you can spare, automatically put that into a savings plan. Like that is first piece of advice. That's what I tell my daughter now. She's young, she's only 11, but I've been trying to instill that into her now.
Nice.
You have to save, you have to save. Now, her question to me is why? I don't make any money. I save. The interest rates are zero. I wasn't quite expecting her and my son to say that and to be aware of that. But I told her it's more about getting into the habit of savings. I mean, at some point, interest rates have to rise. They can't stay low for forever. So it's good to get into the habit now. The other piece of advice that I would say is don't stick with an advisor you don't like. You know, just because your parents use the same person for decades, or your brother, or whomever, your uncle, it doesn't mean that that person is right for you. You know, if you're feeling when you talk to that person is that they're not aware of what your specific needs are, then don't stick with that person. Research alternatives. Find someone you're comfortable with. Like you, this is money. You have to be able to feel comfortable.
It's a relationship.
Absolutely. It's all about relationships. And the banks will say that to you. Banking is all about relationships. But make sure you feel comfortable with that person. And I guess the last piece of advice that I would offer young women is think long and hard about who your partner in life is going to be, whether you choose to get married or not. It's, you know, whether you are same sex or you're a heterosexual couple, it doesn't matter. Think long and hard about who your partner is and whether that person will support you in your goals and whether your financial goals are aligned. It's so important to talk about that. It may not seem that way right in the beginning when you're dating and everything is all wonderful. But, you know, reality has a way of creeping up on you. And quite frankly, divorce is very, very, very expensive.
You know what? I totally agree with you, because if you are with the right partner, whether it has to do with your money or any other decision, you will always make a good decision going forward together. If you are with a partner that keeps holding you back and doesn't allow you to advance or be yourself or flourish, that is going to impact you for the rest of your life. And Warren Buffett had a saying, and I'm paraphrasing right now, you know, one of the best decisions you can make is choosing the proper partner. And as you said, it doesn't matter whether it's same sex, you're married, you're living together, it doesn't matter. As long as the person that you're with, there's an enormous respect for each other and a great support for each other as well.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Now, the other thing is, you know, we often feel lost as investors. And I've talked to quite a few young female university students that are in finance right now. And I did ask them about investing. And the question they said to me was, well, I don't know which app to choose. And I said, well, why do you need to choose an app? You should, you know, why don't you look for an investment advisor who will help you, you know, get along the way, because you're not going to know the answers to everything. And the thing they said was, well, they're expensive. So as you know, you and I were talking about questions and stuff, you know, investors feel lost. How should women get started?
Okay, so step number one is knowing yourself and knowing your risk appetite for investing. I think that is the first step. I mean, what are you comfortable with? Are you the kind of person who is very fearful like me and ultra conservative and doesn't like to take a lot of risk?
But there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But or are you the kind of person who, you know, I can roll with this. I have some money that I'd like to keep super safe, but I have also a portion of my money that I don't mind taking a chance on. Like, you have to know your own risk appetite as a starting point, and don't let anyone kind of, you know, persuade you otherwise, because you're going to have regret if you do something that's not right for you and you're not true to yourself. So know yourself and trust your gut. The other thing that I would say is there are a ton of places now where you can get information about how to get started as an investor that are easy to understand. Well, this program is a great example of that.
Thank you.
And also, you know, my employer, the Globe and Mail, has invested a lot of time and effort to make personal finance relevant to younger women, to millennials, and now we're looking at, of course, Gen Z. So, you know, there is our Young Money website. There is the content that we produce. There is the stress test podcast. I think podcasts and apps, technology. The great thing about the internet and technology, has really made information available to everyone. So start with a list of questions that you have for if you end up going with an app or if you end up going with an investment advisor. Understand your risk appetite. Is this safe? What chances am I taking here? What do I want to achieve? Like, what are my goals? And there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't understand the product, please speak up, because it's important that you understand where your money is going and the risks that you're taking. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be, an MBA. You don't have to have read everything in sight before you get started. Break it up into small pieces. If there is something that interests you, just say you're interested in investing in financial stocks. Start there. Just say you're interested in investing in cannabis. Look at that as a starting point, but make sure that you're going into it clear-eyed, and any niggly feeling that you have about questions, write it down, ask someone the questions, get answers, and keep pushing until you get the answers that you need.
And we're going to talk about questions as well, because that's one of the things that a lot of people have problems with, asking questions. But I want to talk about technology, because you were talking about technology and apps, and there's so much online and podcasts and everything else. How is technology disrupting the investment industry right now?
Okay, so we talked about it. Actually, you brought it up, the notion of fees being very high. There's, a great thing about millennials is that they are hyper aware of costs, and they are not like other generations, because they want value for their money. They're not content with just going along with what has been around forever. They're asking very good questions. So it's true that the technology, the rise of apps, robo-advisors has put a lot of pressure on traditional investment players, the big banks, to look at their fee structures and to come up with alternative offerings that kind of match that lower fee expectation that the client now has. So that in itself is a good thing. It's made the industry more competitive. We've seen different kinds of technology serve as investments. For example, cryptocurrencies. A lot of people are talking about cryptocurrencies these days. But I would say that people, again, really need to understand what it is they're getting themselves into with cryptocurrencies. Does that really match your risk appetite? I think the Quadriga story that we saw a few years ago should serve as a cautionary tale that people should really be prepared to lose all their money. And the OSC, Ontario Securities Commission, and other securities regulators have offered that advice to people, like, be prepared to lose your money. Know what you're getting into. This is a new area. It's hot and exciting, but it's extremely volatile. Understand what you're putting your money into, but also if we take a step back and just talk about robo-advisors and not specifically just crypto. With robo-advisors, understand what you're getting yourself into there as well, because part of the reason the cost is lower is that your ability to get advice from a live human being is not at the same level, right? So is that something that you're okay with? Are you okay with the risks of, entrusting your savings to effectively a computer? I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you just want to put some of your savings there. I'm not saying that these are things that you should should avoid or are bad or anything like that. I'm just saying know what the risks are and what you are comfortable with.
I like the fact that you were talking about risk and risk and risk, because it's really important for people to understand this. And I was a little taken aback a few months ago, actually, maybe it was even in the fall, when I heard people on the radio talking about buying cryptocurrencies and telling people to buy cryptocurrencies. And the problem with that is you have a lot of people out there that don't understand investing, and then they're suffering from FOMO, the fear of missing out. And because everybody else is in it, they figure that they have to be in it. And I love the fact that you keep talking about risk. You have to understand who you are and how much risk you can take.
Absolutely. And, there is a lot of groupthink out there,
Yes.
and which is dangerous. And there's a lot of big players, even in crypto. They make big moves in terms of buying or selling, and it has a huge impact on the larger market. So if you're just an ordinary person, you need to be aware that there are forces larger than you out there. You just don't want to get sucked under.
Yeah, and it's true. We need to stay away from the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and the YOLO, you only live once. I mean, because we work really hard for our money, and it's really difficult to save $1,000, $2,000, and you don't want to lose it on something risky because you're just following what everybody else is doing.
Exactly.
So women, we make less money than men, and we also live longer. So we really have to figure out how to live longer on less money. We were talking about life stages. Let's go there now. Talk about life stages.
Okay, so I think that, each person's life path is different, but some of the common life stage planning that women should think about is, when they're single, when they're married or in some sort of a partnership or a couple relationship. You need to plan for children, including your maternity leave, and then children's education. You have to plan for retirement. But here's another one that I'm going to throw out there. You need to plan to also be a caregiver. And I think that's something that this pandemic has really, really taught us. It could be caregiving for your children or your spouse. It could be for your parents. It's something that we don't like to think about. We don't like to think that we're going to be outliving our spouses as women, because it's, if you're married, you want your partner there with you. And you think of having a long life. You don't want to think that one of you might get sick. But I would encourage people to think about those sorts of eventualities, or make contingency plans for those sorts of things as well, because you never know what life might throw your way.
This is very true. And the problem is a lot of people don't want to talk about negativity, and they just keep pushing it away and thinking it's okay, I'll deal with it when it happens. But sometimes when something like this happens, whether it's a death, whether you've got to take care of someone, you need to be prepared. You can't be blindsided. And you're right. It was a few years ago, I was talking to my family physician, and he said, well, welcome to the sandwich generation, right? Where you're taking care of both of your parents, and you're sandwiched in between. And that seems to be the norm now. And because it becomes such a normal thing, it's something that should be on everyone's radar, and they shouldn't just keep putting it aside. One of the other things I want to talk to you about is, as women, whether you are a female entrepreneur or even somebody working somewhere, we always underestimate ourselves, undervalue ourselves. So if we are, an entrepreneur and we're putting a bid in for a new job, we always think we have to lowball ourselves so that we can absolutely get that job, and we're not sure whether our work is good enough. It's the same thing where, you're working at a firm and you have to negotiate your compensation. So why don't you talk about negotiating compensation? Because you have a really good story about, someone that you spoke with when you were younger and they guided you throughout.
Yes, absolutely. So when I was negotiating for a job, I was, really, really concerned that I had no negotiating skills. And
I don't think any of us do, though. Like, none of us do.
I was so worried that I was going to blow this one opportunity I had to, advance financially in terms of compensation. And so I called up a friend of mine who is also in the media industry, but he's a little bit older than me. And I said to him, listen, I have this company interested in me. I don't want to screw this up. So I know that you're really good at this. Can you help me? Like, what do I ask for? How do I go about doing this? And he was funny because he said to me, okay, Rita, if you want to be paid like a white man, you have to learn to negotiate like one. So get out your paper and pen. I'm going to tell you what to do. And so we sat there And he gave me a list of things to ask for. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to get all this. Like, he's crazy. And he said to me, you're going to get 98% of what you ask for. The trick is to ask for it with confidence, because you're worth it. You have an established track record. You're not some just random person. They want you. And so ask for it with confidence and without apology or explanation. This is what I need to make this transition. So here's some of the tips that he told me. He told me that job offers are about more than just pay. So remember to negotiate your benefits, pensions, and other perks that are involved in the job. And this is something that I wrote about for the Globe too. Know your salary expectations. And what I mean by that is everybody kind of has a sense of what their colleagues are making, right? So know your salary expectations and actually ask for more than you actually expect to receive, so that, if you happen to get all that you asked for, it's a wonderful surprise.
Bonus, right?
A bonus, but if they end up coming back to you and saying, "Oh, we'll offer you what you asked for minus $5,000," it's still a win. So that's the other thing. Here's an interesting one that my friend told me. He told me to play hard to get. So in my case, the company sent me a lowball offer. And I saw the offer and I was like so upset and so offended, and I didn't know what to do. So I called him up and he said, "Don't respond." And I said, "Well, what do you mean don't respond?" And he said, "Don't respond. It'll make them nervous. Wait 24 hours before responding to this lowball offer, and then counter without an apology. Say, this is my number. We can proceed after you get back to me. The ball's in your court." So in my case, I didn't even have to wait 24 hours. I just didn't respond. And I got this panicked email back from the hiring manager saying, "Oh, we recognize that this was kind of a lowball offer. And we just want you to know that, this is a starting point for negotiations." They were afraid that they had offended me, which was great. And so this idea of playing hard to get, that never occurred to me. And he was so right. Negotiate a severance package that is slightly higher than the standard for the company. All these things can be, negotiated. Ask for written commitments for any tools or training that you might require. Request more vacation time. Inquire about flexible work arrangements, such as working from home. And optics matter. So have a meaningful title and report directly to someone with real power. That's really, really important, because that's about establishing your longer term career path. You can always ask for a salary review and a review of your position within a year. Have that built into the offer letter to make sure that you're not overlooked for advancement opportunities. And prioritize the conditions that you have determined in your own mind are non-negotiables. Okay, there's certain things you may not get, but certain things are non-negotiable. So make sure you in your own mind are clear about what those things are. And my very last piece of advice is believe that you're worth it. I mean, you're not going to ask for something that's completely out there and not based in reality. But if your male colleague who exerts the amount of effort that you do, like a fraction of the effort that you do on a daily basis, is making significantly more, then ask for what he makes plus $1. It's the time for women to just, accept what they're given is over.
You've made some pretty incredible suggestions here, which is amazing. My mother always said, if you don't ask, you don't know, and you won't get. And that's one of the key things. When I was talking to a lot of the young women, they were like, they didn't know how to make a decision, and they didn't know how to ask questions because everyone's afraid of asking the wrong question. But there is no wrong question. So how do these young women make a decision, ask the question, and build their confidence?
You have to start by trusting your gut. Trust your gut and get over the fear of asking what might be perceived to be stupid questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. Repeat that to yourself 10 times in the mirror if
I
you have to.
agree.
Trust your gut. You know best. You have to do what's right for you and what is in your own best interest. You have to look out for yourself because this is a hard lesson. Like people, companies, bosses, they all end up looking out for their own interests. They'll bring you along for the ride. And there's some people, I'm not saying that your boss won't care about you or your mentor won't want the best for you, but you have to be self-interested.
And I think that stands the same as well, where you are being heard at work. Everybody wants to be heard in the boardroom or at work. We do have a voice, and we need to have it heard. But I was talking to some young women, and I said, you also have to concentrate on being heard in your personal life. I remember years ago, I had problems with my ceiling, and I went through the yellow pages at the time, found somebody. This person came into my home. He was upstairs in one of the bedrooms. And, he said he had to go look into the attic. And I said, okay, I'm coming up with you. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've never been up there. I want to see what it's like. So I'm going to follow you up there. At the end, I said to him, give me a ballpark about, what you think this job will be worth. And he said $40,000. And I said, that's a bit expensive for a roof, don't you think? And he said, well, you work on Bay Street, you can afford it. So I think, yeah. And the story gets even deeper and crazier. But the key is, as women, we need to be able to advocate for ourselves in not only, the boardroom or at work, but also in professional and personal circumstances as well.
Absolutely. Ask the question, why? Why $40,000?
Oh, well, that was just it. And he said, well, you work on Bay Street. I said, how do you know where I work? And he said, well, I've seen you on TV before. And then I said, well, do you actually think I have $40,000 sitting in my bank account waiting for you? I said, here's what I want you to do. Break it down. Tell me what needs to be done right away. Part 2, what needs to be done, but not right away. And part 3, maybe we'll get to it at some point. And I said, give me a call or send me an email and let me know exactly what needs to be done. And I never heard from that person again. So, people just throw numbers at you at random, and you have to be able to advocate for yourself and say, well, no, that doesn't sound right to me. That just sounds ridiculous.
Exactly. And I think we have to feel comfortable with making people like that uncomfortable by asking questions like, why? Explain it to me. And if they don't follow through, then it wasn't the right it wasn't the right person to fulfill that job for you.
100%.
There's always other people out there, just like with romance, there's tons of fish in the sea. So, look for people who are going to respect you and who value your money and your time.
Yeah, and I think that's important. So what are the biggest money management mistakes that women make?
Okay, so prioritizing weddings over the actual marriage itself.
Oh, you wrote about that.
Yes, I wrote about that in my own case. My mother wanted me to have a traditional Indian wedding, a big Indian wedding. And I'm not the kind of person who likes necessarily all that pomp and circumstance. It's too much. I find it very stressful. Right. And so I told her, no, we're going to get married at City Hall anyway, because my husband is an immigrant to Canada. And so to get his immigration process started, we're going to do the City Hall wedding. We're really happy with that. And maybe a small family only reception after. We don't need to do the big Indian wedding. And my mother she got really upset, and she said, listen, this is my day, not yours. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And she says, my chance to throw a big party, not just for you and Christophe, but for, treat his, parents and all of our family members and all of our friends. And so I kind of looked at my husband, he's an immigrant from France, and I said, I don't know, like, I think we just have to give in. So I told my mom it was okay as long as I didn't have to make any of the planning decisions. She had to plan the whole thing, and I would just show up for all
Good
these
for you.
events. I did talk her down from like 600 guests to 350, but
Wow.
even 350 was too much. But anyway, my parents spent, I think at the time, $50,000 on this wedding. And my dad said to me, you're going to look back on this and you're going to thank us that we created this memorable day for you and for Christophe, and you guys will thank us that we did this. You'll be glad that we did this for you. And I've been married now for 18 years, and my husband and I are still like, why did you spend all that money? We still don't think it was like, my mom and dad are very happy with how it turned out. My mother had her day.
She had her day, right?
She's happy with it, but I still think about it, and was it worth it? Could that money have been used for something else? Could my parents have used that money for themselves and gone on a trip or done something, just invested it, do something interesting for themselves? They probably should have. I think there are a lot of women now. I'm a low maintenance person. I'm not into that, as I said, of the ceremony. I think there are, though, some people that prioritize the wedding over the marriage, and the marriage is the important thing because, that's the thing that has to last. The partner that you choose is the thing that has to last. I would say another mistake women make a lot, and I kind of talked about it before, is not trusting their gut. Deferring to family members for financial decisions is another one. Just because your dad did something, or like I said, your brother, your uncle, your husband, like, be active and involved in financial decisions that affect your life or the life of your kids. Have a voice, take up space, whether it's at your kitchen table, discussing the family budget, or in the boardroom. Take up space and have a voice and ask the question why.
I love the fact that you said be active. And that's really, really important, because when you're hands-on, you learn. And the thing is, throughout our entire life, we're constantly learning. So if you don't know something right now, especially if it's about investing or your money, learn about it slowly, and it'll become a habit. It'll become second nature to you. So you're 100% correct. You be active. Now, we were talking about mistakes that women make. How about any mistakes that you've made?
I've made lots of mistakes.
We all have. We all make mistakes, but that's what makes us stronger.
Absolutely. So I already talked about how I let my mother talk me into this, big Indian wedding. I would say that's the first mistake. I really think my parents should have taken that money and done something else with it for themselves. I would feel better about it if they had. And now, just so you know, my parents spent $50,000, but I read this piece on CBC that the average Indian wedding in Canada these days costs $100,000. To me,
Wow.
it's just a colossal waste of money.
Huge down payment for a house.
That exactly. Give that, if you have that money to spare, by all means, give that to your children to buy a house. That's an excellent down payment. So the other mistakes that I think I've made, I think that I have been too conservative as an investor.
I've probably made that mistake as well. But, I have been a little risky, but I think as women, we are a little bit more on the conservative side.
Yeah. So I have to say, I do have, I am restricted in what I can purchase because of my job. I can't own anything that I write about because obviously there's a conflict of interest there.
Right.
So I do use an investment advisor, but even when I was 25, he would say to me, Rita, you invest like a 65-year-old man. You don't need to be this conservative. You have a long investment horizon and you can afford to take some risks. And I was like, no, I can't. I'm probably, I probably did the right thing, and I'm still a conservative person now. But I think in my younger days, I could have afforded to take a few more risks than I did. But
if it's not in your character,
mm-hmm.
You can look at it in hindsight. If it's not in your character, conservative is not that bad. Because
It's
the
not.
problem is when people become very risky, they end up losing a lot or all of it. So conservative's okay.
Yeah, conservatives are okay, but there's one thing in particular that I think that I could have taken a risk on, and in retrospect, I really regret. And that is, during the financial crisis, my mortgage came up for renewal, and I was thinking, and interest rates were so low at that point, and everyone was getting a variable rate mortgage loan at that time, and I was so fearful about doing that because I kept listening to Mark Carney, who was the head of the Bank of Canada at the time, saying interest rates will eventually rise, interest rates will eventually rise, they'll never, and so I just kind of focused on that. And in retrospect, because interest rates were very low for a long period after, I could have saved thousands and thousands of dollars had I done a floating rate loan, even for a shorter term. And so I think that's one area where I could have taken an educated risk, but I was too fearful to even consider it. So that might be a mistake that I've made.
But you know what? It's okay. You learned from it. It built your foundation of confidence. And that's the last question that I want to ask you about. The first time you were published, you were 6 years old. Where did you get the confidence to write and go ahead and get published?
Well, I didn't know any better. I think I think that's what it comes down to. At that time, the Toronto Star had a children's page on Sundays called Starship. Unfortunately, they've discontinued it, which is really sad, but they had a short story contest. And so I'd read this page as a child and think, oh, this is cool. There's a short story contest. I'm going to enter one of my short stories. So I did. And, lo and behold, they printed it. They selected it and printed it. And then they sent me a check for $10, which blew my mind at the time because I was 6 years old. And like $10. They pay people to write stories? This is the thing I said to my dad. And so my father said, yes, that's what journalists do. Like, they write stories and they're paid to write stories. And then I said, well, that's what I want to do.
Like, here you are.
I want to be a journalist. Well, the thing they don't tell you is the pay never gets better than $10. So, keep that in mind. Word of warning to anyone looking to go into journalism. But aside from that, it's just something that I was doing anyway. I loved, in the case of this short story, it was a piece of fiction, but, I love to write, and I followed my passion. My confidence also came from the fact that I had fantastic teachers all throughout my schooling who believed in me, who encouraged me to pursue a career that I was passionate about, even though it wasn't kind of the normal thing or expected thing for a young person of South Asian descent at the time. My parents really wanted me to go into medicine or law or become an engineer, and I didn't do any of those things. But my teachers really believed in me, and I think me being kind of naive and not knowing that I should question these choices or question my ambition helped. I think doubt is learned. I think we're all confident at the beginning, and somewhere along the way, we let other people's misperceptions of us distort our own vision of ourselves. And so, I've had to unlearn the imposter syndrome and all those sorts of things over the years too, as life's challenges have come about. But I think
we all struggle from that as well, but good for you for unlearning it.
Yeah.
But thank you, Rita. This was amazing. Great stories, so much fun. And I hope that there are a lot of women out there that'll pick out 1, 2, or 3 things that'll help them go further in life. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies, in order to be successful, you need to be able to make decisions. It doesn't matter whether the decision you make is correct, as long as you make one. You see, with every incorrect decision you make, you will build your foundation of failures. But that foundation will build your confidence over the years, and you'll be able to make bigger and better decisions. Remember, you don't have to know the answers to everything. because that's a lot of pressure and quite impossible. Surround yourself with great people and great professionals, and you will never fail at anything. Because when you don't know the answer to something, someone from your great circle of friends will know, and it's a win-win. If you like this video, click like. Please read the disclaimer in my YouTube description because it really is important. And please look out for my next episode and remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll automatically get new video alerts. And follow me on Twitter @Naumovski. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.